Welcome to the Experience of the Soul podcast with Cynthia Alice Anderson, a weekly show helping you grow, prosper, and evolve. Today, episode 306, Solitude as a Scheduled Spiritual Practice. And now, Experience of the Soul.
Hello and welcome to the Experience of the Soul podcast. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I am the host. I'm here today with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 306 of the Experience of the Soul. It is Monday, April 29th. And today we're going to talk about solitude as I love it. Let's celebrate it. Solitude as a scheduled spiritual practice. Solitude as a scheduled spiritual practice.
Yes. And you know, friends, talking about something like solitude, you would think we would be more serious. But in fact, I don't know. I'm feeling so connected today to God, to myself, to Sean, to life itself. And the reason is I had my time of solitude this morning. It's like sometimes in spiritual circles, people put on airs and they act like you have to talk a certain way to be spiritual. And anybody who knows me, and thank you, Sean, for joining me in my joy today. You know, I have a lot of big energy, and the very topic we're talking about today has been such a grounding force in my life that I'm really excited to share it. So even though we're talking about solitude, we're starting out the show going, ooh,
Yeah,
you know?
It's another show. It's awesome. It's another day. It's, there's so much to celebrate,
Another day to be alive, another show. Thank you so much for all of you supporting the show. I mean, it's really been miraculous that we've been on the air this long and that we're able to pay our bills. And I thank you all for the gifts you give, because as you give, it keeps us, it keeps us on the air. So we really, really appreciate that. So, Sean, give us the title one more time, just so I can get in the vibe of that today.
Sure. I was thinking about, I was actually reflecting on it before we started, and I thought a good sort of example of this is how they tell you to put your oxygen mask on before you can assist others. Right. I mean, that's it just made me think of that. Like, you got to take that time yourself, especially for someone like you, right? You have to have your solitude, your time your time to connect before you can actually be of full service to anybody else. Right. And I think that's true for all of us. So today we're talking about solitude as a scheduled spiritual practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're so right. And I know we record on days different than this airs, but if you follow us on social media, recently you probably saw a post. I put it on this morning where it was just a picture of my little tray I took out, had my coffee and my water and of course, my intentions journal that I wrote. And it was so special to me to have an unlimited time for my spiritual work. I purposely today had several hours of silence, and all I did was my spiritual work. I took my time, I prayed, I meditated, I journaled, I worked my new goals. And so when you see that picture there on social media, I want you to know that's a for real thing. We're not just trying to look spiritual or take the perfect photo. That's just a snapshot of what my setup is as I go into my work. So, friends, just join with me today in the idea that you are a spiritual being. You're here with a spiritual purpose. And that spiritual purpose for all of us is to bring more goodness, more God, more love, more peace into the world. In other words, we're here to grow, prosper, and evolve. That's the way I say it. But as Sean is often reminding me, we all need peace. And today's show in particular, and I titled it this way on purpose, Solitude as a Scheduled, I think I often say, or Solitude as a Spiritual Practice. Right, Sean? That's exactly what it is, right?
It is. It's solitude as a scheduled spiritual practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I said it that way because I think some of us are not very conscious about how much time we need to spend on the spiritual. We schedule hair appointments. We schedule, we'll schedule a mani-pedi, but we don't schedule our spiritual time. And so today is about like just bringing it to consciousness for you. Like, okay, don't forget. And, Sean, when you and I, were together recently at your house and we were riding around in the Jeep, that was time because we're going to shoot some meditations. We want to be on location. So as we did that together, though, we had to schedule that time. That didn't just happen.
Yes. Yeah, no, we definitely had to schedule it, but it ended up being, super relaxing. And I think it served,
Right.
Many purposes for us, us together as a team and us together as individuals. And yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful couple hours that we got to just hang.
I mean, it was. And so friends, I want you to think about this, especially because so many of us are not attending church necessarily on a regular basis. You don't always go to church anymore. You're doing prayers at home. You might go for a hike in the woods and connect with God that way. You might listen to my podcast. One person told me in the pandemic, they listened to the podcast every single day, and that got them through the pandemic. Like every day for a year, they were listening. And so if you're not going into churches, then you don't have that time scheduled. Does that make sense? Like it's so important. Our culture has changed where it used to be nothing was open Sunday. Nothing was planned. You would never have a kid's soccer game. And, it used to be in Georgia, you couldn't even buy certain things on Sunday.
There are some places still like that,
Yeah. Or as we say in Georgia, Sunday.
Right.
On Sunday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah. So this is why I'm talking about this. I just want to lift up for all of us to be mindful. Am I scheduling my solitude? I want to be honest that for myself, it's not always easy to do. I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, I'm a speaker. I am in charge of my own organization as well as the senior minister at Unity North Tampa, both of which bring so much joy to my life. They also take a great deal of time. I basically have 2 full-time jobs, right? Or 2 3/4-time jobs, I guess. So I want you to think about how can you create some time for yourself for your own spiritual practice. Now, I want to, help you just think through it because for me, scheduling my solitude, scheduling time for my spiritual practice sets an intention. So, how can you create time for your spiritual practice? When you do, it's like you were telling yourself, your body, your mind, your soul, the universe itself, God, that this matters to me. And I've noticed whatever I give my time and my money to is what I most value. So how can you create time for your spiritual practice? And before you even answer that, I want you to think about what life feels like when you don't make time for your spiritual practice. So sometimes I find it's easier to teach what to do after first you recognize and realize what happens when you don't. Like for me, if I don't set aside time for my spiritual practice, I'll be honest, life is unfocused. It can be frenetic. It can be even, what's the word? Conflicted, It can even be depressing. If I'm not making time to refuel, to recharge, and really the number one word I think of in my own spiritual journey is feeling connected to God. Because it doesn't really matter what I do for a living, I still want to be connected to God, right? So it's like as a minister, people think that somehow I'm magically connected more than they are and that I don't have to do the work that I talk about. But in fact, I have to do more because I am constantly giving on the spiritual level. So it's, I've had people ask me over time, like, well, what is a spiritual retreat? Are you just taking a vacation or what is, I don't understand what a what a spiritual retreat is. Because, a few times a year, 2 to 3 times a year, I'll go away for a few days. Often I don't talk for 24 or 48 hours. And I have times of listening and retreat and being alone and being quiet, So I have to do that because it brings me great peace, great solace. And the number one word for me is connection. I know I'm repeating that. I want to always know and feel my connection to God. I want to know and feel my own connection to God. I have a personal relationship with the divine that goes beyond any church, any denomination, right? It goes beyond any dogma. I always want to know and feel my connection to God. And so this is so important because if I'm feeling disconnected, I start getting into the personality, into the ego self. I start judging things, uncharacteristically harsh. And I get so rooted in the mind so quickly. And of course, we all do that ultimately. So my hope for us is that we can spend some time in solitude, some time in quiet and peace, just listening to the voice of the divine, just listening, being quiet, being still. And in my experience, what's so amazing is as I get quiet and still, the incredible energy that arises out of that. There's ideas, there's feelings of rejuvenation, and most of all, peace, right? That peace, knowing that I am connected to God, that God does love me, that things are working on my behalf, that as I set my intentions, I'm going to be in conversation with the universe itself. I'm in relationship in such a way that every morning, as I set this intention, I'm going to be my senses or even my awareness maybe is kind of heightened because of this setting intention. And so when the universe answers with a sign or with a symbol or with an answer to an intention, I'm uniquely aware that, oh my goodness, the universe is very interested in me. And again, when I say the universe, I mean God himself, God herself, God of all that is. And in my world, God, the universe, those are all interchangeable. The description, as I was thinking about this show, I think one of the words I used is that scheduled times of quiet and silence can be literally a healing balm to the soul. That's how I feel about it. When I was really little, I grew up in a really large family, and we lived on the edge of the woods. We had we owned 16 acres of property. Initially, my family had owned like 100 acres. We were not wealthy. It was just an area nobody wanted to buy in. And my grandfather had been in real estate and over time would sell off land. And that's really how they afforded to stay and live on that property. So there was a home that my grandfather had built, and my mom and her siblings had actually gathered the stones from the property. It's called the Rock House, and it was built by hand and designed by my grandfather. So that was down the hill from us, and we lived up the hill in what everybody called the big house because there were so many of us. So there was the Rock House that was down by the creek, and the creek ran through. There was a natural spring on the property where we'd get water, and that spring, that was called Azalea Springs, was what we called the property. And it was very, very humble. There was no running water or anything, early on. We would literally bathe in the creek. Why am I saying all this? Well, by the time I grew up and we were all living, my siblings and I were living in the big house, there was an area of woods between the big house and the Rock House. And there was this big rock, and that's what I called it, the big rock. And it was in the woods, and it was just up from the creek. And it was in this area where there were just trees everywhere, pine trees, a maple, oak, just dogwoods that my granddad had planted. Just beautiful, beautiful area. The rock must have been, I don't know, probably at least 6 feet across, and it was flat like a table. You could just sit on it, or as a kid, I could lay down on it. And what I would do if, there was a lot going on in the house, which there always was, or I just needed space away from the family, I would go down to to my big rock, to that little sweet area in the woods, and I would just sit and I'd listen. I'd watch a squirrel up above, or I'd listen to the creek down on the right-hand side, and that would make me feel connected again. It would make me feel like I could go back into the world and do what I was supposed to do. So this was what I'm describing as the healing balm to the soul. It was a time of solitude that brought peace. It brought solace, really is the right word. It just brought this overwhelming idea that everything was going to be okay. And that was an important idea for me to know, because there was a lot of things going on in the home. There was a lot of activity, and I needed times of peace to regroup and reconnect. As I think about that growing up, and I think about the world today is full of anger. It's full of resentment. It's full of us versus them. We are in a time where our media, both from the right and the left, are seeking to sway us and our beliefs. They are inciting, really, much of the anger and the resentment and the fears, really. And so this topic today is really meant to support you in moving out of that and back into what you know to be true, that you are connected to God, that all is well, that you are supported, you are blessed, and that you can be lifted, and that anytime that you choose to be at peace, anytime that you choose to, as the scriptures say, go apart for a while, that you can reconnect and find that solitude. And of course, the idea is that as we do that on a regular basis, we begin to take that with us. And I had an acupuncturist once, and he spoke very little English, and he would often say to me, I was in a very busy time when I was going to him, and he would often say to me, "There's too much loading, need to unload." And he would say, "Just be quiet, take some deep breaths." So as I was doing my acupuncture appointment, the needles were in, part of my practice was to breathe deeply, to go back to myself. And as I worked with him over time, every now and then he would say things to me that were just these spiritual gems. And, one time he said, "Now that you've unloaded, this quiet you feel on the inside, just take that with you." He said, "You can be very busy, but be quiet on the inside." And that was what I felt, that it anchored this place in me of peace and quiet and solitude, so that even if I'm out speaking, or I'm going to pick up my son and I have to run home for an appointment, or whatever it may be, or, I have to travel somewhere to help my family with something, I carry that quiet with me. And if it gets to the point where I'm not feeling that quiet and I'm feeling frenetic and harried and unfocused, that's why I know, okay, I need an extended time of solitude again. So as you're listening, you might say, well, I'm in the business world. I don't have time for solitude. And I'm going to say, you don't have time not to be in solitude. With the many gifts it gives you, with this sense of awareness and this sense of peace, I want you to imagine your life and your day carrying the silence with you, carrying this peace with you, this healing energy and balm to the soul I'm talking about. Just think about the meetings you have, the decisions you have to make in a day. And think about, would I rather be anxious and frenetic and harried and worried, or would I rather be centered, at peace, still? So you don't have time not to be in solitude. There was a teacher, meditation teacher I worked with. Well, I guess she was my spiritual teacher for some time. And she would say, "You're busy. You don't have time to meditate." She would laugh. She'd go, "You don't have time not to meditate." She said, when you think you're that busy, that's the time you need to stop and be still. That's the time you need to stop and be still, when you don't think you have the time. So sometimes in this time of solitude, so let me explain a little bit what I mean. So when I'm talking about solitude as a scheduled spiritual practice, what I mean is there should be a little time every single day that you're being quiet and still to listen. You need to be quiet and still to listen. It's so important to be quiet and still to listen. That said, most of us do work. Many who listen are parents or grandparents and have very busy schedules and lives. So I am not expecting you on a daily basis to spend 3 hours in silence. That said, some silence and solitude every day is going to be very, very important. And then I want you to think about once a week, could I make time to be quiet and listen? That's a little bit longer. So just make a little time every single day to be quiet and listen. It was interesting today after my own work. I had, first I had, done my intention journal, and I, for some reason, was really guided to make a to-do list of things. And then it was like, no, be still some more. I was praying about what do I do next? It was like, breathe. And so I was out on the back porch. I have a small little porch. I don't have a large home. I live in a small 50s bungalow. And I love my little home, my little backyard. And I was on the back deck, and the birds back here are just prolific. They love to sing in the morning. And so as I was doing this work and I had, done my intentions and I had made my to-do, I thought, I'm just going to sit here for a minute. It was kind of cool. So I took a blanket and just wrapped up myself, and I said, I'm just going to breathe. And I took 3 deep breaths. And the guidance was, it's time to redo your goals and your dreams, goals, and desires. Just write those down, be present to that. So out of that time of simply listening, I only took 3 deep breaths and had a whole other guidance of an activity to do. And after that activity, I was guided to do more deep breathing. I came inside, I sat in the chair where I love to meditate, and just began taking some really deep breaths. And I felt filled up. I felt at peace. There was no worry. There was no concern. And think about all I had accomplished. I took an hour probably in the first part of the day to do this. I had my coffee as I did my intentions. Then I wrote my to-do list for the week. I had already confirmed all my clients the night before, so I didn't have any to do like that. I stayed with my spiritual practice. I did those 3 deep breaths. 3 deep breaths, the way I do them, take a while. And then I was, guided to do those dreams, goals, and desires. After that, a little more breathing. So the entire practice that felt like having a week off took 1 hour. And then I spent 2 more hours doing some things around the home, just being very slow though and very intentional. I have so much excitement, and I can be so high energy that I can just create work for myself without realizing it. And, okay, I'll do this and then I'll do that. So I have to really remain intentional as I go throughout my work and my day. And I was just I moved slowly. I pet my dog. I listened to the birds a little more. I had my breakfast. Everything was slow and intentional. And so even though the next activity was going to the post office and going to a workout, living my life the way we all do, that quiet, that rest, that solitude, I was carrying with me. Like my old friend, Dr. Chin would say, I was quiet on the inside through all of that activity. So I hope you can hear what I'm saying, that it doesn't take hours a day. But I want you to think about not what does RCA think? What does Cynthia Alice think? That sometimes your guidance can begin with just a few deep breaths, and you will be guided in your own process. Like, I 100% trust, if you're listening to this show and you've been guided to it, that you've been on a spiritual journey probably for some time. So you know what's yours to do. And the things I do are simply reminding you of what you already know to be true, that you know the truth, and that this energy, this goodness, this peace does reside within you. But what sometimes, my clients and my friends, even our listeners, will say to me, yeah, I never make enough time for my practice. So this is me telling you today, you are worth making that time for yourself. You are worth making that time for yourself. And you're going to have to schedule it, probably. One of the reasons I think you're going to have to schedule it is our addictions to our phones and our devices. Many of you know I still have a love-hate relationship probably with technology, because I remember when computers were supposed to make our lives easier. And, the good news is a computer and a device helps me connect with people all over the world. The problem is we are connected all over the world all the time and we never unplug, right? So because our phones are always with us and they're so addictive, it's really easy to get up in the morning to check if you had any messages after you turn off the alarm before you even go to the bathroom after you get up in the morning. So the reason I'm saying to schedule the time is because we are so bombarded with the devices, you're going to have to schedule it, right? And think about it as, I am worth making the time for myself to schedule my spiritual time. Solitude as a scheduled spiritual practice. One of the commitments I made years ago to myself is that every week I'm going to have extended time in nature, because I know that lifts me up. I know that supports me. And I know that brings me to a place of solitude within myself, a place of peace within myself. I should say, yeah. So this time alone in silence is a healing balm for the soul. Beautiful, beautiful work. And if I'm with somebody, like I'm going to the beach or to the lake or something like that, I always manage to have some time alone, some time to be quiet. And if I'm going with the right people, guess what? They're going to say, oh yeah, go ahead. Be here when you get back. I'll do a long walk on the beach, or I'll go wade in and swim a little bit, or just be quiet, lying on the sand. Love that. I love that. So I do want to share with you a poem from one of my favorite writers. And when I say a favorite writer, it's funny, as I've rearranged my office some, it may change again because I'm about to get some work done in here. But behind me, you can't see them all, but I have a few books that are my favorite books. And this is one of them. This has been a favorite book of mine for, I don't know, 20 years. I think I need to contact the author. The name of the book is Being Home, and the subtitle is Discovering the Spiritual in the Everyday. The poem I want to read to you from this book today is called Listening. Listening. Somehow, I must sit to listen. Standing implies the readiness for action, for the executing of the will. To hear you, I must sit down and calm down. The magpie mind chatters. It doesn't know about stopping. How helpless I feel in its automatic firing, its busy babbling. It is impossible to hear you as long as I am full of sound. I turn this helpless prayer toward you. Help me to be quiet, to sit here, slowly unknowing everything, becoming dark, becoming yielding, just sitting. Here without will, let me become willing. Here without concepts, help me to know. Here without doing, turn me toward usefulness. Let my heart find its ears in you. Let the countless cells of my body open in order to listen. Let my being come into your presence and experience the sound of your light. Friends, this is my absolute hope for you, that you will make time to listen, as you make time to be quiet, as you make time to be in solitude, that the voice of your soul will speak, that you will listen to all that is, and that God speaks to you in many, many ways, through nature itself, as you take deep breaths, as you do a quiet walk in nature. You are going to be loved and supported. You are going to be filled with peace, with joy, with knowing that you are connected and you are loved. This is my hope and prayer for you, my friend. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful week, and blessings on the journey.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Experience of the Soul podcast with Cynthia Alice Anderson, helping you grow, prosper, and evolve. This podcast is made possible because of listeners and viewers just like you. If you would like to support the podcast with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head on over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Experience of the Soul podcast is copyright 2024 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved, and is produced by Sean Kilgore. A production of the Soulworks Group, Incorporated. Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The Soulworks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. Soulworks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience, with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the Soulworks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.